Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. I'm Jarrett Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman, and we're hitting the midway mark of June here. We're through 2 weekends of camp action and official visits and all of those things being pretty full-fledged. And Sam, I know you're, kind of neck deep in some visit updates. I'll just give you an update on my visits over to LSU campus last week. It was a great time, both days. A lot of smiling familiar faces, a lot of good work. And so I personally feel great about the Tigers and my time in Baton Rouge. So if you need to jot that down for your next post, that's free quotes from Jared Roser. How you doing, man?
Nonetheless, I had FOMO the entire time. So I was hoping you were having a bad time, but it doesn't seem like that was the case. I'm having some regret about shaving my face this morning. I feel like I can't get past this baby face here. But, onward and upward, Jarrett.
Meanwhile, I really should just shave for a change and actually get rid of whatever all this.
It gets very itchy and it's very difficult.
That was the last time I actually really shaved and not just kept it trim in this little scruffy BS. I immediately regretted it as well because it did not feel good on my skin. But yeah, man, to the LSU stuff, we're going to talk a lot about that. Just kind of some updates, the latest you're hearing from some big prospects, similar to some of the stuff we talked about last week. Now with just another weekend under our belts, as well as, LSU has a new offer out here locally, a guy that we'll get to in a second that I don't think you're grinding a hell of a lot of tape. You're not typically doing a lot of kicker evals this time of year, but also a couple of new commitments in state for Louisiana, Lafayette, and Tulane. So we'll talk about some of those, but getting right into this action over at LSU's campus. They had their first elite camp on Thursday. They had an O-line, D-line camp on Saturday, as well as the 7-on-7 camp. And as much as you said you were hoping I would have maybe a bad time, they were 2 beautiful days. They were hot as could be with limited showers. But I take that over whatever gross rain has befallen us today. But also some key visitors to campus this weekend. And let's kind of start with KJ Edwards, the running back from Carthage, Texas, right over the state line out there in East Texas, a guy that, as much as we talk about Bowe Bentley from a quarterback prospect standpoint and being, the big name to know for LSU fans, KJ has kind of taken that role, it feels like, from the running back front. And it sounds like and looked like he had a nice trip to Baton Rouge with Coach Frank Wilson and Corday Hankton and all of those guys. What's kind of the latest you're hearing about KJ?
Yeah, this is Coach Frank's guy for the 2026 class. And even though LSU just offered KJ this spring, they made a big leap into his recruitment. First of all, it's only been Texas, Texas A&M, and Colorado so far. But Frank Wilson obviously has dipped into Texas before. We can now officially say that. He won the Caden Durham battle, and that did not go down easy with Oklahoma. Another LSU-Oklahoma head-to-head battle for the record books, Jarrett. We'll get to later. But yeah. I think that Texas has been the leader in the clubhouse with KJ for a long time in his recruitment, but that was under Tashard Choice. Obviously, Texas vibes are Texas vibes, and Sark is still the guy in charge over in Austin. But I think LSU is going to be in the mix with KJ. He's not going to make a decision until August, which gives Frank and company a couple more weeks and months to chip away here, and he still has official visits to both A&M and Texas. But I think that LSU put itself, as I like to call, striking distance with this very electric 4-star running back from East Texas.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm in let me go put in an RPM mode yet with him, but I do really like the overall vibe coming out of this weekend and where it seems like the Tigers stand with him. And that's good because I think, if you want a running back in this class, that he's obviously a really talented one and someone that has, when you look at the running back board, has seemed like he's the guy that keeps coming up over and over again. You mentioned being Frank Wilson's guy. As we watch so many other dominoes fall at other positions, I've looked at, okay, I guess, they're really heavily in on KJ Edwards right now because I don't hear a whole hell of a lot about a lot of other running backs right now for LSU. How important is this next month and a half or 2 month stretch for them to try and make sure that they do get their guy at that position in this class.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's always the opportunity that if he makes a commitment before his senior season, with a strong LSU season, you get a kid from East Texas to Baton Rouge, about 3-4 hours. It's really not that big of a drive for a Saturday night in Death Valley. But given the fact that, barring a commitment to Colorado, which, obviously that's, again, out of state, if he commits to Texas or A&M at the beginning of August, that's going to be tough for LSU to overcome. You have to expect that Frank is going to, swing away, but also put an offer on the table for someone else in this class. Until then, it's massive to keep swinging away, try to win this early, because conversely, if LSU is able to land the commitment, Oklahoma kept swinging away at Caden Durham. You're going to have, and other schools got involved too along the way, because when you get your evals right, those kids who pop in August often have great senior seasons, and that catches the eye of schools. So it's going to be critical. You want to be ahead, playing from ahead if you're LSU. They have a lot of ground to still overcome, I believe, but it's become I think less contenders in the way, for a lack of better terms.
And just, reminders to fans, when you're recruiting at this level, you're recruiting guys that other schools are going to want. So it's always going to be a battle, whether they're committed to you or committed elsewhere or open, that you're probably recruiting guys that other schools want in the fold for a reason. And so it's never official until signing day and ink hits paper and all those things. But obviously, as you were just mentioning, the positioning and jockeying to try and play from in front and really kind of lead the way and just be building from there is important. And so as much as some folks, I think, a little bit burnt last year after the Bryce Underwood saga, look at recruiting now and say, man, just tell me who signed. And that's fine if that's all you want to know. But ultimately, there's a lot of interesting storylines and information along the way, along the journeys to how we get to that point, for sure. Another guy that was on campus this weekend that we talked a little bit about last week, I believe, when he backed off of that Mississippi State pledge, Emanuel Tucker, another guy that seems like he had a phenomenal trip to Baton Rouge, and that the Tigers have really continued to position themselves extremely well to potentially add him to this offensive line class for 2026, where they currently have the two in-state guys in Jalen Chapman and Bryson Martinez.
Yeah, he backed off of his commitment to Mississippi State he made earlier this spring, right after Phil Lodeholt got hired as the Bulldogs offensive line coach, coming over from Colorado. But quietly, you have to credit Brad Davis for the work he put in behind the scenes. So instead of phrasing it that Emanuel Tucker backed off his Mississippi State commitment after an OV to Ole Miss, I think the corrected version would be he opened his recruitment ahead of his official visit to LSU, because Brad Davis and Brian Kelly knocked it out of the park with not only Emanuel but his family. You got to remember, this is a kid from New Albany, Mississippi, who made his way back to Baton Rouge. And his family was blown away by the hospitality of the staff, including Brad Davis, who, by the way, did this last year, beating out Mississippi State and Ole Miss for Tyler, the kid
Miller.
Tyler Miller from Laurel, Mississippi, out there, very, within in the backyard of Mississippi State. Brad Davis is obviously his touch, but also his player development over the years. Obviously, Will Campbell now being a top 5 pick in this draft helps LSU in this one. I expect he's going to make his decision now on Thursday, and I would be shocked if he is not an LSU Tiger by this weekend.
I feel like we give Brad Davis his flowers at times on here. We maybe haven't brought him up as much, through the last year and a half or however long we've been doing this, as Corey Raymond is obviously a steady name mentioned here, Cortez Hankton with some of these wide receivers in this 26 class. But of late, the number of offensive linemen and high-level offensive linemen that LSU is making the cut for and is among their final schools, and it seems like to a man consistently reference the relationship with Brad Davis, just really appreciating the rapport and the way that he goes about his business and the track record he has of obviously the 4 guys drafted this year, as well as every stop he's had. He's found guys, he's developed guys and set them up for really strong opportunities. And so, I mean, we look at last year's class dipping into Mississippi and Florida and Arkansas for some really high-level guys to bring in. And we look at this year with the In-State Foundation and now the great positioning for Emanuel Tucker. And we talked last week about Zayden Krempin and just being in the mix for him, trying to battle Texas to maybe, sneak him out of state. This weekend, Bryson Cooley from Mississippi and Darius Gray from Virginia will both be in town. So credit to Brad and the job that he and the folks around him are doing right now. And you mentioned anticipation of Emanuel Tucker. What's kind of your read on those other two guys that I mentioned that'll come to town this week, Bryson Cooley and Darius Gray? Darius, we've mentioned a little bit before. I don't know how much we've talked about Bryson, but where those two guys may stand and just the way this LSU class appears to be coming together at offensive line in particular.
Yeah, well, you talked about Brad Davis, and obviously he's from Baton Rouge, and he's been coaching all over the SEC. You can remember when he was at Missouri and Florida trying to pluck Cardell Thomas away from LSU. And when he was at Arkansas, it was a big reason why Will Campbell was considering Arkansas at the time. And that's a kid from North Louisiana that, Jared, that, Arkansas tends to get now and then. So I feel like, and when he did come in with Will and Emery's class, obviously from then on out, he has done such a great job of not only finding the best offensive linemen, and we're going to talk about a few coming up here in a second, but just like, from a regional perspective, where he recruits the entire state of Louisiana, obviously, but he recruits Texas. That includes the difficult parts like East Texas, and goes head to head with these, big in-state schools in Houston and Dallas. He's also been in Central Texas out here where I am, where sometimes, you have to kind of go into the sticks to find some kids. And he goes into Mississippi and Georgia, and he kind of, that's like the area where LSU thrives. And I just think it's a good embodiment from a geographical perspective. Speaking of which, Darius Gray is someone I have a pick in for LSU ahead of this weekend's visit. Now, Darius is very impressionable. His recruitment has been very fluid. But I think that, these last few visits are the ones that are going to end up deciding it one from the other. He was at Clemson at the top of the month, and I think Clemson really put their best foot forward. But I think it now shifted a little bit toward Tennessee after last weekend. They've gotten him on campus, I think, twice in the last 3 or 4 months. And they've been there in a long time in his recruitment. But I think ultimately most people connected to this recruitment, including myself, believe it'll come down to these next 2 visits of LSU and then South Carolina before he makes his decision. This one can go in a lot of different directions. But, the combination of Brad Davis and your boy, Joe Sloan, being a Virginia guy, has given LSU that leg up. And I was told after he was in Baton Rouge, I believe it was in April, that they really won over the family there, and it's been kind of riding that wave of momentum ever since. And then additionally, you mentioned Bryson Cooley. Again, I mean, how many times can you win the lottery? I don't know if Brad Davis can double dip in the SIP, because if he does, we're going to get T-shirts that says double dip in the SIP. And if we count Tristan Keys, we get some shorts. But I just don't, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, other schools in the SEC covet Bryson Cooley. You have to imagine that if Emanuel Tucker is locked in with LSU, that's going to open the door for both of those in-state schools in the SIP to kind of double down on Bryson Cooley.
You mentioned Tristan, and so just as kind of a quick tangent, his Hattiesburg team was in the 7-on-7 this weekend at LSU. Tristan was not there. He's kind of, I guess, wrapping up or getting back from that Texas A&M official. And so he's continuing his treks around the SEC throughout this month, rounding up with that June 20th date at LSU when, that'll be the big date that a lot of folks are watching for a lot of different guys coming to LSU. He's another guy that, again, as I mentioned before, fans have to expect that other programs are going to continue to pursue. He's one talented player for sure. I will say, just from my perspective, it sounds like LSU is remaining confident having him in the fold. They know they've got a battle on their hands, but they feel like they've got a good relationship, a good rapport, a good plan there to make sure that all of the boxes are checked for Tristan to be a part of this class. And so we'll just continue to watch how all of that unfolds. We've mentioned a couple of times, I guess, Bowe Bentley. We talked more about him last week after his LSU visit, and we'll get into in a sec an update on kind of where things stand for him coming out of this Oklahoma visit now. But before that, do you have any other kind of notables from the LSU campers or visitors or anybody that you've kind of heard some positive vibes about, or just any kind of notes to take away from on the LSU side from this weekend?
I was told from my friend Jared that the vibes were all positive, but besides that, no, nothing off the top of my head. Let me look into my show notes. Not my show notes. I call this OV Mania section of my tracker. No, I have just notes on Emanuel Tucker and KJ Edwards.
Yeah, those felt like the two biggest takeaways from the weekend in terms of, momentum toward a decision here sooner than later. There were, a few new offers out and whatnot, so fans can kind of keep up with some of those. A lot of the guys that did make their way to Baton Rouge this weekend were, 27s and 28s in terms of new offers and whatnot. I don't remember if I told you, though, the aforementioned Bryson Martinez is working a lot at tight end right now. And so keep an eye on that this year. He was out there during that line camp. He was actually with the 7-on-7 team running around catching passes outside. So that was kind of cool. Bryson looks like he's in great shape. And, a couple of the other notable LSU guys, targets and commits and whatnot that we've talked about before. Also nice weekends. Aiden Hall had a few interceptions for a Carr team that won its division championship. Braylon Kale was good out there for Cecilia. And the list goes on. But getting to Bowe, the proverbial hay is, I guess, in the barn in a lot of ways with the official visits that we were all waiting to see how the trip back to Baton Rouge last weekend and up to Norman this past weekend went. So now as he wraps those up and kind of, hunkers down with the family and turns to decision mode here sooner than later, what's your latest feel on Bowe, who, like we mentioned with KJ, is obviously a huge priority at his position for LSU?
Yeah, I thought that LSU pulled ahead after hosting Bowe after May 30th. I think what Brian Kelly and Joe Sloan tried to do was give Bowe a day in the life as an LSU quarterback, and for someone who is I think just knows exactly what he wants in a school. I think that he was as a student of the game. I think he really fell in love with, obviously, the idea of being a quarterback in Joe Sloan's room and with the receivers and talent that they have on the outside, in Tristan Keys, potentially Jabari Mack, Kenny Darby, and LSU's roster is like that every single year with guys, on guys on guys. It's stars on stars on stars. And I think he liked the culture. I think he liked it from just a 17-year-old kid's perspective of being in Baton Rouge. The baseball stadium is right there, walking distance from the facility. And I think he liked all of that. Obviously going into this weekend, he's been tied to Oklahoma for many reasons. But of course, Oklahoma has a quarterback committed. And this is a new offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, who is coming over from Wazoo, where he had John Mateer, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I think that Oklahoma, basically rolled out the crimson carpet, you would say. And I think that the biggest thing I got from talking to Bowe earlier was that they kind of went about things differently. He didn't go into much detail. He didn't want to open up too much. So knowing what we know about the LSU visit, where he was very open, it seems like the conversations he had at Oklahoma were a little bit more closed detail. I think there's pros to both. That's the vibe I got. I think, we're going to learn a lot about Bowe by the decision he makes. But I still get the sense that LSU is kind of the team to beat, quietly. I don't say that with too much, overbearing confidence, but I think based on the relationships, I think based off of what he's valued in his recruitment, and I think off the tempo of these respective official visits, I think like you said, the proverbial hay is in the barn. LSU everyone knows who LSU's top quarterback target is. I don't know how well Oklahoma made Bowe feel like a priority, but I don't know if what they can say that could have overcome what LSU might be saying.
In terms of that prioritization, for sure. And obviously, as much as you look at the track record that Oklahoma touted for years back when Lincoln Riley was at the helm of look at what we've done with quarterbacks and Heisman and whatnot. Lincoln is obviously now at USC, and LSU has another Heisman quarterback under its belt a year ago in Jaden Daniels. And so the track record is pretty well established there for quarterbacks coming through LSU now. What a difference, a decade and a half make in terms of the perception of a position and the development of a position at a certain program. But
you're not kidding. As a couple of former LSU beat writers, there's quite a few stories we had about the offensive sparks at this time of the year.
But what's interesting to me too with Bowe's recruitment, and I guess with any of these prospects in today's age of recruiting, I think LSU, after the way that the Bryce Underwood saga unfolded last year, now any level of optimism that you catch, particularly for a high-profile quarterback, is going to be cautiously optimistic, more so than ever before. And so it's going to be interesting to see just kind of where the vibes are on their side of things in terms of how much confidence they'll really express and how much buzz will come out, on top of the fact that Bowe has been a little bit more of a quiet recruitment compared to Bryce a year ago anyway. And how some of these next couple of weeks unfold before ultimately a decision is made and announced.
Yeah, and on that note, I think, like I said, there's been some in his circle that maybe have said that a decision might come either after one of these OVs or maybe this week, in the aftermath of both being wrapped up. But the what I'm hearing is not till after the Elite 11 finals, which begin this time next week in Los Angeles. Again, nothing surprises me if he committed, Monday night before hopping on a bird to LA. But based off what I've gathered, that does not seem to be the likely scenario. I would expect toward the latter end of this month.
Yeah, and I don't expect it to drag much longer than that, though. He might, finish up at Elite 11 and then make his move. But
correct.
Wrapping up with some of these in-state guys, the new 2026 offer for LSU out in-state, number 15 of the in-state offers for LSU, Gavin Higgins from Parkview Baptist right here in Baton Rouge, the guy that I mentioned. You're probably not crushing a whole lot of kicker tape, but some folks that do, the Coles kicking group have him ranked as a 5-star and the number 7 kicker in the country for his class. And so that says quite a bit. He was on the all-state ballot this fall as a junior for Parkview Baptist, ends up being an all-state honorable mention after a junior season in which he made 7 of his 11 field goals with a long of 43 yards, 42 of 43 on PATs, and 47 of his 51 kickoffs getting into the end zone. And so certainly has some leg on those kickoffs, and pretty accurate there from closer in and stretching out to about 40 yards. But again, we don't get to see a whole hell of a lot of kicking action. They kind of have a lot of their own camp dates and camp circuits and whatnot, but he's a guy that is one of the top kickers in Louisiana and becomes the 15th in-state offer for the LSU Tigers in 2026. Just thoughts on, or if you want to share with folks how different those recruiting processes are for some of these specialists, and it largely goes under the radar, but obviously a critical piece of, the product on the field come fall to make sure you have a guy that can make it.
Lucky number 15. Yeah, no, you and I were catching up a little bit about some of the more interesting and polarizing kicker, punter recruitments of years past in Louisiana. We mentioned Joseph Balavis from Mandeville. We had another Coles 5-star out of Vatry, Louisiana, not too many years ago. Alex, I think his name.
Alec Mahler, who's in Hammond, America now. I was just catching up with his dad, a couple of weeks ago. That kid could boom it. He's someone that I'm surprised LSU didn't take a longer look at.
I agree. Coach Valdez still speaks extremely highly of him. Listen, it's just a different process in that you have to go and kick in front of the special teams coaches. So it's, we talk about the importance of camps and working out for schools, whether that's going into your junior or senior years. Well, everything is contingent on this. And June is like, I talked about official visit mania being the name of my tab for this month. Well, it's like official visit camp superplex for kickers and specialists. It's going and largely making your decision on the spot, or if you're going to have a national recruitment, then it can get a little bit testy, but still way faster. We talk about quarterbacks being on a timeline. Literally, kickers and punters are always on a 30-second shot clock. They decide within 30 days of getting those offers or less. It's like a insanely fast but fun process for them, and sometimes it ends out really well.
And I mentioned a couple of new commitments around the state for other in-state programs this weekend. On Saturday, Jackson Williams, the defensive back from Archbishop Shaw, shared his commitment with Tulane. And on Sunday, Jaden Reed, the safety from Neville, announced his commitment to the Raging Cajuns. Two guys that I think are great gets for those respective programs. I know Jackson is someone that Tulane coaching staff is extremely excited about. He's been primarily a safety thus far in his career there on the West Bank with Coach Tierney, who we've talked about a bunch, Coach Chad Boyd and those guys over on the West Bank, but he's transitioning to cornerback this year. And I know not only Tulane, but some Power 4 programs along the way this spring have been really intrigued by his kind of untapped potential there and think he has a chance to play football for a long time. And Jaden Reed, a guy that has been, for that really strong Tigers secondary up there in Monroe, has been a huge difference maker, an all-state guy, 124 tackles, 2 sacks, two interceptions this past fall, a guy that's a tackle machine at safety for Neville, but also, makes some nice plays on the ball. He continues what has become a pipeline of Neville to Lafayette in the secondary, with Cam Riley signing this year, Marion Elam, Lorenzel DeBose a couple of years ago, and just guys continuing to make that trip down from Monroe to Lafayette. And so a couple of good prospects for some of the Wave and Cajuns fans that are always looking forward to hearing a little bit more about their recruiting coverage. Thoughts on those additions? Again, in-state programs who have done a nice job of finding good fits for their respective programs and seem like they each have a new one there this weekend.
Yeah. On Jackson, I was surprised to see his recruitment not take off more this spring. He got the early Tulane offer after visiting in January or February. But someone who's obviously super intriguing skill set. He's super long I think he's 6'1", 6'2". He measured in Uptown. I think he tested at a 4.5. He's, like you mentioned, some of the Tulane staff is really excited about. Personally, with that size, I know it's fun. I'm having a mental battle. I love cornerbacks with length like Jackson has, but more and more we're seeing safeties with that size get drafted, and he kind of fits that range more so. But I'm with that testing, he certainly can play corner. I'm curious to see how that experiment goes this year under Coach Tierney's watch. And I love the experience that he has, at least at both positions, depending on what they want him to do in that secondary. Per usual, Coach Summerall and that staff hitting a couple of home runs.
And you mentioned liking him at safety. That's been an interesting piece of all this to me too, because as much as I mentioned Jaden Reed and his tackle numbers and the physicality he brings from his strong safety position, Jackson's physicality stands out when he gets downhill and is ready to, square up and put a hit on somebody. He has been more than comfortable and confident in that role from his safety position. And so obviously it'll look a little bit differently this fall as a corner, but he's someone that if there's that level of confidence of what he can bring as a cornerback, he certainly does have some versatility to his game, because we've seen what he can do at safety.
Hank Tierney seeing a little Amorion Johnson, size, speed, length, just out on the outside, and he knows what his primary positions are. He doesn't want to keep him back at safety. He wants him to make noise on the outside.
We'll be looking forward to seeing how that transition goes for Jackson, and just how the rest of this summer goes for a lot of these guys we're talking about. And then I just continue to feel like this fall is going to be here faster than I'm ready for it to, because I'm looking forward to some kind of summertime, but it feels like we're going to be kicking this thing off sooner than later. And make sure you're sticking with us throughout for all these updates throughout the summer. And then obviously when we get into fall mode and have some Friday night lights action to look forward to. In the meantime, keep up with Sam's work on Rivals, mine on 3, and everything going on. Sam, I'll let you get back to it with all of those visit updates I know you're working on.
Appreciate it.
There you go. He's Sam Spiegel, and I'm Jarrett Roser. This is Louisiana vs. All Recruit That Boot. Until next time, y'all be well.